In the quiet moments between your thoughts, there exists a promise, a divine promise that precedes time itself. This promise whispers that what you seek has already been given, that what you long for already belongs to you in the realm of completion. Have you noticed how the world responds not to your wishes but to your assumptions? How the fabric of your reality seems woven from the invisible threads of what you have accepted as true. This is no coincidence, my friend. This is the law that governs all creation. When you ask for something, do you stand in the place of lack, peering anxiously towards some distant horizon where your desire might one day appear? Or do you recognize that the answer already exists, complete and perfect, waiting only for your recognition? The secret lies not in asking, but in receiving. And receiving happens not in some future moment, but now, right now. In this eternal present where all things exist in completion, your mind races forward, seeking methods and techniques, desperate to bridge the gap between wanting and having. But what if there is no gap? What if the journey from desire to fulfillment requires not distance traveled, but perception shifted? Consider how a seed contains within it the full expression of what it will become. The oak tree doesn't strive to become itself. It simply unfolds according to the pattern already encoded within it. Your desires too contain their own fulfillment, already coded into the fabric of consciousness itself. To live as though God has already answered is to recognize this profound truth. Manifestation is not creation but revelation. Not making something new but unveiling what eternally is. The answer to your prayer exists now in the mind of God, complete and perfect. When you close your eyes tonight, feel the weight of this truth settle into your being. Feel how it softens the desperate edge of wanting. Feel how it transforms anxiety into the gentle breath of acceptance. You are not waiting for God to act, you are learning to see what God has already done. In this recognition lies the beginning of true power. Not the power to make things happen, but the power to allow what already is to express itself through the vessel of your consciousness. This is where we begin our journey together, in this sacred place of divine completion where all prayers are already answered. The world sleeps under the blanket of visible facts, while you and I are awakening to a profound understanding that what appears solid and unchangeable is merely the shadow cast by something far more real. Imagination. Not daydreams or fantasies, but the divine creative force that forms the very foundation of existence. What if everything you see began as something unseen? Every building, every relationship, every circumstance in your life. All of these were first conceived in the invisible realm of imagination before they stepped into the light of physical reality. Notice how your mind automatically argues against this truth. But my circumstances are real, it insists. My limitations are facts. This is the ancient habit of consciousness, to bow before the altar of what is, forgetting entirely that what is began as what was imagined. Imagination is not escapism. It is not wishful thinking. It is the most fundamental power in the universe, God's own creative principle operating through you. When Scripture speaks of being made in the image of God, it speaks of this very capacity to imagine and thereby create. When you close your eyes and see yourself as you wish to be, you are not indulging in fantasy. You are engaging the same creative force that spoke worlds into being. You are participating in the divine act of creation itself. Why then does imagination seem so powerless against the solid facts of life? Because we have been trained to doubt it, to dismiss it, to relegate it to the realm of childhood and dreams. We have learned to give our allegiance to what our senses report rather than to what our imagination decrees. Yet the truth remains, imagination creates reality. Not sometimes, not occasionally, but always. The circumstances of your life right now, every detail of them were fashioned from the substance of past imaginings, both conscious and unconscious. Feel the weight of this truth. If imagination has created your present, then imagination can create your future. Not through struggle or strain, but through the same effortless process by which a seed becomes a flower, from within outward according to its nature. Tonight as you rest, allow your imagination to gently reshape your concept of yourself. See yourself not as striving to become, but as already being what you desire to be. Feel the naturalness of this state. Breathe into it. For in that peaceful acceptance you set in motion forces beyond your comprehension. There exists a principle so simple yet so profound that once grasped, it transforms every aspect of your life experience. This principle is the power of assumption, the ability to consciously choose what you will accept as true about yourself and your world. For as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. These ancient words remind us of a timeless truth. We do not relate to reality directly, but through the medium of our assumptions. Like invisible lenses, these assumptions color everything we perceive, shaping not just how we see the world, but how the world presents itself to us. Have you noticed how some people seem to live in entirely different worlds, though they walk the same streets and breathe the same air? One person moves through life encountering opportunity and kindness at every turn, while another finds only obstacles and rejection. They do not live in different physical worlds. They live in different assumed worlds. Your assumptions are not passive opinions about life. They are creative forces that mold the very substance of your experience. Every assumption once accepted begins immediately to work toward its own fulfillment, gathering evidence and orchestrating circumstances in perfect harmony with itself. Consider how dramatically your experience changes when you assume yourself to be capable rather than limited, deserving rather than unworthy, secure rather than threatened. It is not merely that you interpret the same events differently. The events themselves begin to conform to your new assumption. This is not positive thinking or wishful dreaming. This is the law of consciousness in action. What you deeply assume to be true of yourself and your world must be expressed in your experience, not because you have fooled yourself, but because assumption is the foundation upon which reality builds itself. How then do you harness this power of assumption? Not through mental effort or affirmations repeated without feeling, but through the quiet certainty that comes when you recognize a truth about yourself. When you know something to be true, truly know it in the depths of your being, you need not convince yourself of it. You simply rest in that knowing. Tonight, identify one assumption that has limited you, perhaps the assumption that you are not enough, that success is for others, that love has passed you by. Now, with the gentleness of a parent cradling a child, lay this assumption aside, and assume instead that what you desire has already been given, already belongs to you by divine right. Feel how this new assumption changes your breathing, softens your body, quiets your mind. This is the feeling of stepping into alignment with a higher truth, the truth that what you assume you become. Within the quiet chambers of your mind, a conversation unfolds ceaselessly, a subtle dialogue between you and yourself that shapes the contours of your life more profoundly than any external voice ever could. This is your inner conversation, the unheard discourse that precedes and determines all that becomes visible in your world. Have you ever paused to truly listen to this conversation? To notice the tone of the voice that speaks to you from within? For many, this voice is a harsh critic, a doubter, a bearer of limitation and fear. It whispers of unworthiness, of reasons why not, of dangers that lurk in the territory of your deepest desires. Yet this voice is not your enemy. It is simply a habit of consciousness, a pattern established through years of absorbing the world's limited perspectives. And like any habit, it can be changed, not through force, but through gentle, persistent awareness. The transformation begins when you recognize that you are not the voice, you are the one who hears the voice. This simple shift in perspective creates a space, a tiny opening through which new possibilities can enter. For if you are not the voice but the listener, then you can choose which voices to entertain and which to release. Imagine for a moment what would change if the voice that speaks to you within were the voice of someone who believes completely in your capacity, your worthiness, your inevitable success. How would this voice address the challenges you face? What tone would it use? What words would it choose? This is not about forcing positive thoughts to drown out negative ones. Such effort only strengthens what you seek to overcome. Instead, it is about consciously selecting a new conversation partner within, one who speaks from the perspective of the wish fulfilled, who sees you as you wish to be, who knows that what you seek has already been given. When you catch yourself engaged in inner talk that contradicts your desire, conversations of worry, doubt, or limitation, simply notice without judgment. Then, with the same ease with which you would turn from an unpleasant stranger to speak with a beloved friend, shift your attention to a new inner conversation, one aligned with what you wish to be true. This practice, simple yet profound, begins to reshape the very substance of your consciousness. For your inner conversation is not merely a commentary on your life, it is the creative force that shapes it from within. What you consistently hear within, you will inevitably experience without. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, consciously choose the inner conversation that accompanies you into dreams. Let it be one of gratitude for what has already been given, of quiet confidence in what is unfolding, of peaceful acceptance of your good as an accomplished fact. For in that gentle shifting of inner dialogue, worlds begin to change. In a world that prizes activity, achievement, and constant motion, we have forgotten perhaps the most essential truth of creation, that all things emerge not from striving but from stillness, not from the crowded surface of life but from the fertile void where all possibilities exist in perfect silence. Consider how a seed transforms into a flower. Does it happen through effort, through the seed's desperate striving to become something other than itself? No, it happens through a process of silent unfolding, the quiet allowing of an inner pattern to express itself outwardly according to its nature. Your desires, those deep longings that persist despite all reason, are seeds planted in the soil of consciousness. Their fulfillment comes not through your anxious effort to make them grow, but through your willingness to enter the fertile void where creation begins. This void is not emptiness in the sense of lack or absence. It is emptiness in the sense of pure potential. The blank canvas before the painting, the silence before the symphony, the darkness from which all light emerges. It is the womb of all creation, the resting place of God's infinite creative power. How do you enter this fertile void? Not through adding, but through subtracting. Not through filling your mind with more information, more techniques, more striving, but through creating space within, space for the divine to enter, to whisper, to create through the vessel of your allowing consciousness. In practical terms, this means learning the art of mental stillness not as a technique to achieve something, but as a recognition of what already is. When the mind ceases its constant chatter of judgment, analysis, and projection, what remains is not emptiness but fullness, the fullness of pure awareness from which all forms arise. This stillness is not something you create, it is something you recognize as eternally present beneath the surface noise of thinking. Like the deep silence at the bottom of the ocean, undisturbed by the waves that crash above, this stillness is always there, waiting for your recognition. When you touch this stillness, even for a moment, you make contact with the creative force of the universe itself. From this still point, transformation happens not as a result of your effort, but as an expression of the divine pattern already encoded within your desire. Tonight, as the world grows quiet around you, allow yourself to sink below the surface of thought into the fertile void of pure awareness. Feel how this space is alive with potential, how it hums with the quiet certainty of creation in progress. Here in this sacred stillness, your good is not waiting to be manufactured. It is waiting to be recognized as already accomplished. Beneath the surface of our daily experience lies a profound truth that few discover. We do not manifest what we want. We manifest what we are. More specifically, we manifest according to the state of consciousness we occupy, the inner climate of thought, feeling, and assumption that forms the foundation of our being. A state of consciousness is not a thought or a mood that passes through you. It is a place you dwell, a perspective from which you view all of life. Like a room with particular furnishings and a specific quality of light, each state colors everything you perceive, influencing not just how you see the world, but how the world responds to you. The man who dwells in a state of lack sees scarcity everywhere, discovers evidence of insufficiency in every circumstance, and attracts experiences that confirm his assumption of not enough. Another man dwelling in a state of abundance perceives opportunity, where others see limitation, recognizes sufficiency, where others see lack, and draws to himself experiences that mirror his inner conviction of plenty. These men do not live in different physical worlds. They live in different states of consciousness, and the law is absolute as within, so without. The outer must express the inner. It cannot do otherwise. How then do you change your experience? Not by manipulating external conditions, that is, beginning at the end. You change your experience by changing your state of consciousness, by relocating the center of your awareness from one inner dwelling to another. This is not a matter of thinking different thoughts while remaining in the same state. It is about actually shifting your consciousness to occupy a new state entirely, moving from the state of wanting to the state of having, from the state of seeking to the state of finding, from the state of becoming to the state of being. Such a shift cannot be forced. Like trying to fall asleep through effort, the harder you try, the more elusive it becomes. The movement from one state to another happens not through strain but through surrender, not by making something happen, but by allowing what already is to be recognized. The secret lies in your capacity for feeling. When you can feel yourself to be what you desire to be, not as a distant possibility but as a present fact, you have entered the state from which that desire must manifest. For feeling is the language of consciousness, the means by which you communicate with the creative forces of your being. Tonight, identify the state you currently occupy regarding your deepest desire. Is it a state of separation, of wanting, of someday? Now, with the gentle power of imagination, enter a new state, one where what you seek is already yours, where the gap between desire and fulfillment has been closed not by time but by consciousness. Feel the naturalness of this state. Breathe its atmosphere. Let it become so familiar that you feel at home there. For when you truly occupy a state, you need not worry about manifestation. It becomes as natural and inevitable as the sun rising at dawn. There exists a paradox at the heart of conscious creation that confounds the logical mind yet reveals itself clearly to the awakened heart. The more desperately you pursue your desire, the more it eludes you. The moment you surrender, it falls effortlessly into your experience. This principle of surrender is perhaps the most misunderstood of all spiritual teachings. The world has taught you that surrender means giving up, admitting defeat, relinquishing your dreams on the altar of reality. But true surrender is something altogether different. It is the recognition that what you seek is not separate from you, not distant from you, not withheld from you. It is already yours in the realm of completion. Surrender in its highest sense is not surrendering your desire. It is surrendering the belief that your desire exists apart from you in some future time or place. It is surrendering the struggle, the grasping, the anxious need to make it happen. It is surrendering the very concept of separation between you and your good. Have you noticed how tension constricts not just your body but your capacity to receive? When you clench your fist, nothing can enter your palm. When you tighten your mind around a desire, fixating on the lack of it, you create the very resistance that prevents its expression in your experience. The art of surrender begins with a simple but profound shift in perspective from seeing yourself as separate from your desire to recognizing yourself as one with it. This shift happens not through mental gymnastics but through the quiet recognition of an eternal truth. What you seek is seeking you, what you desire desires you. There is no separation except in thought. How does one practice this art of surrender? Not by trying to surrender. Such effort only reinforces the very tension you seek to release. True surrender happens naturally when you recognize that there is nothing to do, nowhere to go, no distance to travel between you and the fulfillment of your desire. This recognition comes not at the end of struggle but in the midst of it. In that moment when you realize that your striving has become an obstacle rather than a path. In that moment of clarity you simply let go, not in resignation but in profound trust that what is yours by divine right cannot be kept from you. Imagine holding your desire as you would hold a beloved child, with love, with care, but without clutching, without the fear that it will slip away if you loosen your grip. Feel how this gentle holding creates space for life to move, for the invisible forces of creation to arrange circumstances in ways your anxious planning could never conceive. Tonight, identify where you have been grasping, where tension has created resistance in the path of your manifestation. Now, with compassion for yourself, practice the art of surrender, not by pushing away your desire, but by drawing it so close that it ceases to be something outside yourself and becomes instead the very atmosphere of your being. For what you surrender to, you become. In the vast lexicon of creation, there exists a language more ancient and more powerful than words, a language that speaks directly to the creative forces of the universe without intermediary or translation. This is the language of feeling, the true alphabet of manifestation. When Scripture speaks of faith as the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, it points to this profound truth. Feeling is the substance from which outer experience is molded. Not intellectual agreement, not verbal affirmation, but the deep visceral sense of a thing as real. This is what shapes the contours of your life. Consider how your body responds not to what you think intellectually, but to what you feel emotionally. When you feel fear, your heart races and your muscles tense regardless of whether the threat is real or imagined. When you feel joy, your body releases chemicals of well-being regardless of external circumstances. Your body does not distinguish between what is actually happening and what is vividly felt in consciousness. Neither does the creative principle that shapes your reality. It responds not to what you think you want or to what you say you believe, but to what you feel as real. The feeling of wealth held consistently in consciousness must produce experiences of abundance. The feeling of health must manifest as physical well-being. The feeling of being loved must draw loving relationships into your life. This is not magical thinking, it is the operation of natural law. Just as heat invariably expands metal, feeling invariably expresses itself in circumstance. The bridge between the invisible world of cause and the visible world of effect is built not of thoughts or words, but of feeling tones that vibrate with the reality of the wish fulfilled. How then do you speak this language of feeling with fluency and power? Not by trying to generate emotions through force or repetition, but by using the divine gift of imagination to create scenes that evoke the feeling of the wish fulfilled naturally and effortlessly. When you see yourself as you wish to be, when you hear the words you long to hear, when you move through the world as the person you are becoming, and when you do this with such clarity that it evokes genuine feeling, you are speaking the language of creation in its purest form. The intensity of the feeling is not what matters. Forced emotion carries little creative power. What matters is the quality of the feeling, the quiet certainty, the peaceful knowing, the gentle familiarity of something recognized rather than something pursued. Tonight, as you rest in the stillness of your own consciousness, allow yourself to feel the reality of your desire as already fulfilled, not as something you are affirming or convincing yourself of, but as something you are remembering, something so natural and so intrinsic to your being that it requires no effort to claim as your own. For in the language of feeling, what you can feel as real without strain or pretense is already yours, in the only place reality begins, within. Across time and tradition, wisdom teachers have spoken of a state of consciousness so vital to creation that it was enshrined in Scripture as a Sabbath, a sacred space of rest that follows the 6 days of labor. Yet this Sabbath transcends the calendar. It is not merely a day of the week, but a state of being essential to the manifestation of all desire. The Sabbath state is the consciousness of completion. It is the inner knowing that what you have asked for is already given, already accomplished in the invisible realm of cause. It is resting from the labor of making it happen because you recognize with perfect clarity that it is already done. In the language of Scripture, God rested on the seventh day, not from exhaustion, but from completion. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. This divine template reveals the pattern of all creation. First the invisible conception, then the gestation in darkness, and finally the emergence into visible form. Your role in this creative process is not to strain and struggle to bring your desire into being. Your role is to enter the Sabbath state, to rest in the absolute knowing that what you have conceived in consciousness must, by immutable law, externalize itself in your experience. This rest is not passivity. It is not resignation or withdrawal from life. It is the most dynamic, the most powerful state of consciousness possible, for it aligns you perfectly with the creative currents of the universe itself. It places you in the slipstream of manifestation, where what you desire flows toward you rather than being pursued by you. How does one enter this Sabbath state? Not through effort, for effort implies that something remains to be done, that the creative act is incomplete. You enter the Sabbath state through recognition, the clear-eyed seeing that your desire exists now in completion, requiring only the natural gestation period to emerge into visible experience. This recognition brings with it a profound shift in feeling, from the tension of wanting to the release of having, from the anxious energy of seeking to the peaceful certainty of finding. And this feeling shift is the signal that you have truly entered the Sabbath state. Notice how your body changes when you make this shift. The shoulders drop, the breath deepens, the mind quiets its frantic planning. There is no need to figure it out, to make it happen, to force the door open. In the Sabbath state, every door that needs to open does so of its own accord, revealing pathways you could not have discovered through effort alone. Tonight, consider where in your life you have been laboring unnecessarily, pushing against what seems to resist you, trying to create what can only be allowed. Now, with the gentleness of someone coming home after a long journey, allow yourself to enter the Sabbath state regarding this desire. Feel how it changes everything to simply know that it is done, not as a technique or an affirmation, but as the recognition of what has always been true. For in the eternal now, where creation happens, your prayer has already been answered, your desire already fulfilled. All that remains is for you to enter the rest that allows it to unfold in perfect timing. Within each of us exist two distinct orders of mind, two fundamentally different ways of perceiving and engaging with reality. Scripture names these the natural man and the spiritual man, and understanding the difference between them is essential to mastering the art of conscious creation. The natural man is that aspect of consciousness conditioned by the evidence of the senses and the limitations of past experience. It sees what has been and what appears to be, accepting these as the boundaries of what can be. It builds its house on the solid ground of facts and realities, dismissing as fantasy anything that contradicts established patterns of thought. The natural man, Scripture tells us, receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him. Why foolishness? Because to the natural man, only what can be proven by past experience is real. The idea that consciousness precedes and shapes reality, that the invisible determines the visible rather than the other way around, this is utter nonsense to the natural mind. The spiritual man, by contrast, perceives from an entirely different dimension. It recognizes that what appears to the senses is not the cause but the effect, not the source but the expression. It sees the visible world not as solid reality but as liquid possibility, responding moment by moment to the template of consciousness that shapes it. To the spiritual man, nothing is impossible because nothing is fixed. All apparent facts are simply reflections of consciousness that can be transformed when consciousness itself is transformed. Where the natural man sees obstacles, the spiritual man sees opportunities. Where the natural man confronts problems, the spiritual man discovers solutions embedded within them. The journey from natural man to spiritual man is not about denying the physical world or escaping into fantasy. It is about recognizing the true relationship between inner and outer, that the outer is always and only an expression of the inner, never its cause or its limitation. This recognition doesn't happen through argument or intellectual persuasion. The natural man cannot be argued out of its perception. It must be transcended through direct experience of a higher order of reality. This transcendence occurs when you discover your own creative power, when you witness firsthand how a shift in consciousness produces corresponding shifts in circumstance. Such experiences accumulate over time, gradually undermining the natural man's certainty about what is realistic or possible. With each demonstration of the creative power of consciousness, the grip of the natural mind loosens, allowing the spiritual perspective to emerge not as belief but as knowing. The spiritual man doesn't fight against appearances. It simply sees through them to the causal realm behind them. It doesn't struggle to change conditions. It changes the consciousness from which conditions arise. And in that simple shift, seemingly miraculous transformations become not just possible but natural. Tonight, notice where the natural man still holds influence in your consciousness, where you defer to what appears to be rather than what you wish to create. Now, with compassion rather than conflict, allow the spiritual perspective to illuminate these same situations. Feel how this shift changes not just how you see, but what you see as possible in your life. For as you move from natural man to spiritual man, you move from bondage to freedom, from limitation to possibility, from the prison of what has been to the open field of what can be. And in that movement lies the secret of living as though God has already answered. Because to the spiritual man, every prayer is answered the moment it is sincerely offered. Before a garden can flourish, the soil must be prepared. Before a canvas can receive the artist's vision, it must be primed. Similarly, before consciousness can fully embody the state of the wish fulfilled, the mind must be prepared, cleared of obstructions, softened to receive, made fertile for the seed of new creation. This preparation is not about adding more knowledge, more techniques, more spiritual concepts. It is about creating space through the gentle release of what obstructs the natural flow of manifestation. For the mind, like nature, inherently moves toward harmony, toward the fulfillment of its deepest patterns. It is only our accumulated resistance that prevents this natural movement. What then are these obstructions that must be gently cleared away? First among them is the habit of judgment, the constant evaluation of what is as good or bad, desirable or undesirable, worthy or unworthy. This habit creates a state of perpetual resistance, a subtle but persistent push against what is, which ironically fixes it more firmly in place. When you judge your current circumstances as wrong or unwanted, you bind your consciousness to them through the very energy of rejection. What you resist persists not because it has power over you, but because your resistance gives it power. The first step in preparing the mind then is to practice non-judgment, to see what is without labeling it, without pushing against it, without telling stories about what it means. The second obstruction is attachment to form, the fixed idea that your desire must manifest in a particular way through specific channels according to a predetermined timeline. This attachment creates tunnels of perception that blind you to the infinite ways your desire might come to you, often through pathways you could never have imagined. Preparing the mind means cultivating openness to how the universe will deliver your good to you. It means surrendering the need to control the process while maintaining absolute clarity about the essence of what you desire to experience. The third obstruction is the habit of placing your good in the future, of seeing it as something to be attained rather than something to be recognized as already existing in the eternal now, where all creation takes place. This habit of future placement keeps your desire perpetually at arm's length, always approaching but never arriving. Preparing the mind involves bringing your consciousness fully into the present moment, the only place where creation happens, the only point of power. When you truly inhabit the now, you discover that everything you seek exists here, waiting not to be created but to be recognized. How does one engage in this preparation of the mind? Not through force or rigid discipline, but through gentle awareness and consistent return to the truth. When you notice judgment arising, you simply acknowledge it without judgment about the judgment. When you find yourself attached to particular outcomes, you gently loosen your grip, returning to the essence of what you truly desire to experience. When you catch yourself placing your good in the future, you bring it home to the present moment where it has always existed. Tonight, as you rest in quiet awareness, allow your mind to be prepared as soil is prepared for planting, not by your effort, but by your allowing. Feel how the release of judgment creates space. Feel how the surrender of attachment creates openness. Feel how the embrace of the present moment creates immediacy in your relationship with your desire. For in this gentle preparation, you make yourself ready to receive what has always been given. In every act of creation, there comes a moment so subtle yet so significant that it often passes unrecognized. The moment when manifestation has already begun, though nothing appears to have changed in the visible world. This is the seed moment, the sacred instant when your desire crosses the threshold from potential to actual in the invisible realm of cause. This moment doesn't announce itself with fanfare or external signs. It reveals itself in the quiet certainty that arises within, a knowing beyond knowledge, a recognition beyond evidence that something fundamental has shifted, not in circumstances, not yet, but in the relationship between you and your desire. In the seed moment, your desire ceases to be something separate from you, something you're trying to attract or achieve. It becomes instead an intrinsic part of your being, as natural to you as your own breath. The anxious energy of wanting dissolves into the peaceful awareness of having, though nothing has changed in the world around you. This shift is primarily felt rather than thought. It registers as a subtle but distinct release, as if something that has been held in tension is finally allowed to rest. The struggle ends not because you've given up, but because at some point you recognize that what you've been seeking has already been found. The seed moment often occurs when you least expect it, not at the peak of your striving, but in a moment of surrender. Not when you're focused intently on your desire, but when your attention has momentarily moved elsewhere, creating the space for recognition to occur naturally. How can you recognize this seed moment when it comes? By its fruits, the subtle but unmistakable changes in how you feel and perceive. Anxiety about your desire diminishes. Questions about how and when lose their urgency. The need to talk about your desire, to seek reassurance or validation, naturally falls away. A quiet confidence takes root, not based on evidence but on inner knowing. And perhaps most significantly, your relationship with time shifts. The pressing need for immediate manifestation dissolves into the peaceful certainty that perfect timing is unfolding. The seed moment is the conception of your desire in the womb of creation. Like a physical conception, it happens in an instant, though the full manifestation requires a gestation period before it becomes visible to the senses. This gestation cannot be rushed, just as a child cannot be born the day after conception. Divine timing operates according to natural law, yet unlike physical conception which happens to you, spiritual conception, the seed moment requires your conscious participation. It requires your willingness to accept the fulfillment of your desire as an accomplished fact in consciousness before a single external circumstance has aligned to support it. This acceptance is not pretense or make-believe. It is recognition of the metaphysical truth that creation moves from within outward, from invisible to visible, from consciousness to circumstance. When you truly accept this truth, you understand that the moment of inner acceptance is the actual moment of creation. Everything that follows is simply the natural unfoldment of what has already been determined in consciousness. How then do you participate in this seed moment? Not by forcing it or trying to manufacture it through technique, but by creating the conditions in which it can naturally occur. You cultivate receptivity through stillness, through surrender, through the willingness to receive what is already given rather than striving to attain what seems withheld. In practical terms, this means releasing the anxious energy of seeking and allowing yourself to rest in the quiet certainty that what is yours by divine right cannot be kept from you. It means trusting the process of manifestation so completely that you can relax into it, knowing that your only responsibility is to maintain the inner state from which your desire must emerge. Tonight, consider the desires that feel most pressing in your consciousness. Now, with gentle awareness, observe whether the seed moment has already occurred without your recognition. Notice whether you still feel the urgency of seeking, or whether a quiet certainty has begun to take root. If the former, simply allow yourself to release into trust, creating the space in which the seed moment can naturally occur. For when the soil is prepared and the conditions are right, the seed plants itself. There exists a practice so simple yet so profound that once mastered, it transforms your experience of reality from one of pursuing to one of allowing, from striving to receiving, from becoming to being. This practice is living from the end, inhabiting in consciousness the reality you wish to experience before it has manifested in the world of form. Living from the end is not about projecting yourself into some distant future where your desire might one day be fulfilled. It is about recognizing that in the realm of pure consciousness where all creation begins, there is no future or past, only the eternal now. In this now, your desire already exists in completion. Your task is not to create it, but to align your awareness with it. This alignment happens not through affirming what isn't yet true, but through shifting your perception to recognize what is eternally true beyond the evidence of the senses. It is about relocating the center of your identity from the limited self that lacks to the expanded self that already possesses. The practice begins with the recognition that consciousness is the only reality, that what you experience as the world is nothing more or less than consciousness expressed. From this understanding flows the natural conclusion to change your world, change your consciousness, not as a technique to get something, but as a recognition of how reality actually operates. How does one practically live from the end? It begins with clarity about the feeling essence of your fulfilled desire. Ask yourself, how would I feel if my desire were already realized? What would my inner state be? How would I see myself? How would I move through the world? These questions direct your attention to the state of consciousness that corresponds to your desire fulfilled. Once you've identified this state, you step into it not through effort but through imagination, the divine faculty that transcends time and space to connect you directly with the reality you wish to experience. When you see through the eyes of the version of yourself for whom the desire is already fulfilled, When you feel the feelings of that self, you create a bridge between your current awareness and the expanded awareness where your desire already exists. This is not fantasy or escapism. This is engaging the same creative principle through which all things come into being. First in consciousness, then in experience. The sequence never varies: be before you do, do before you have. Most people reverse this natural order, believing they must first have in order to do and do in order to be. This is the very definition of living from the middle or the beginning rather than from the end. Living from the end means washing your face in the morning as the person who already possesses what you desire. It means speaking, thinking, and feeling throughout your day from that state of fulfillment. It means relating to the people in your life, making decisions and responding to circumstances from the consciousness of one for whom the prayer has already been answered. At first, this practice may feel artificial, like you're pretending or trying to convince yourself of something that isn't true. But if you persist, something remarkable happens. A moment arrives when you're no longer pretending, when the state you've been assuming becomes more natural to you than the state of lack or limitation you once occupied. This is the moment when living from the end ceases to be a practice and becomes simply the way you naturally proceed. Tonight, identify one area of your life where you've been living from the beginning or the middle, where you've been seeing yourself as moving toward your desire rather than already one with it. Now, with the gentle power of imagination, relocate yourself to the end, to the state of consciousness where what you seek is already yours. Feel how this shift changes not just your thoughts but your entire way of being in relation to your desire. For in that shift lies the secret of effortless manifestation. In the lexicon of manifestation, perhaps no word has been more misunderstood than faith. The world has taught you that faith is blind belief, a desperate clinging to what you hope might be true despite all evidence to the contrary. But the faith of which Scripture speaks is something altogether different. It is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Notice the words substance and evidence. These are not terms of wishful thinking or vague hoping. They point to something tangible, something real, something that exists not merely in thought but in the fabric of consciousness itself. Faith in its true meaning is the actual substance from which manifestation forms itself. This substance is not physical, but it is nonetheless real as the thoughts that shape your perception, as real as the feelings that flow through your body, as real as the awareness in which all experience arises. It is the invisible material from which the visible eventually emerges according to immutable law. How then does one cultivate this substance, this essential material of creation? Not by trying to believe what seems unbelievable, but by looking beyond appearances to the causal reality behind them. Not by denying what the senses report, but by recognizing that the senses show only effects, never causes, and that causes always exist first in consciousness. True faith begins with understanding, the clear recognition that consciousness precedes and shapes reality, that what you hold as true in the depths of your being must express itself in your experience. This understanding is not mystical or supernatural. It is the practical recognition of how creation actually works. From understanding comes trust, not the anxious trust that hopes against hope, but the quiet confidence that comes from aligning yourself with universal law. When you truly understand that manifestation flows naturally from consciousness to circumstance, trust becomes not an effort but a recognition, not something you do but something you allow. And from trust comes the actual substance of faith, the feeling certainty that what is held in consciousness must express itself in experience. This certainty is not mental but visceral. It registers in the body as relaxation, as the release that comes when you know beyond doubt that what you desire is already yours in the realm of causes. This faith substance has a distinct quality that distinguishes it from mere positive thinking or affirmation. It is characterized by absoluteness, the complete absence of conflicting states or contradictory beliefs. When faith substance is present, doubt doesn't need to be fought because it simply isn't there. Questions of how or when lose their urgency because the inner knowing of fulfillment is so complete that details of process become secondary. You recognize the presence of true faith not by the intensity of your belief, but by the quality of your being, by the natural way you embody the state of the wish fulfilled without effort or pretense. When faith substance has formed itself within you, you no longer need to convince yourself of anything, because conviction has been replaced by knowing. Tonight, examine the quality of your faith regarding your deepest desires. Is it the anxious faith that hopes and pleads, or is it the substantial faith that knows and rests? If you find yourself still striving to believe, gently shift your attention from the effort of believing to the recognition of what is already true in the realm of causes. Feel how this shift transforms faith from something you're trying to create into something you're allowing to reveal itself. For true faith is not your creation, it is your recognition of what eternally is. In the practice of conscious creation, few elements are more frequently misunderstood than timing. The natural mind, conditioned to see time as fixed and linear, struggles to reconcile the truth that in the realm of manifestation, timing is both precise and fluid, both determined and responsive to consciousness itself. There exists what might be called divine timing, the perfect unfoldment of events according to a wisdom far surpassing the limited perspective of the personal self. This timing operates not according to the calendar or the clock, but according to the readiness of consciousness to receive and the preparedness of circumstances to align. Consider how a fruit ripens on the vine. It does not mature according to your schedule or desire, but according to its own inner process and the conditions surrounding it. No amount of impatience will hasten it. No amount of delay will prevent it once the conditions are right. So it is with the manifestation of your desire. The divine timing of your manifestation is determined not by arbitrary fate or some distant cosmic plan, but by the state of your own consciousness and the natural gestation period required for invisible causes to produce visible effects. Just as a pregnancy requires approximately 9 months to bring forth a child, each manifestation has its own natural gestation period, not as punishment or test, but as the necessary process through which the invisible becomes visible. This period cannot be rushed through force of will or anxious wanting, but neither is it fixed and unchangeable. For the state of your consciousness, your degree of alignment with the wish fulfilled, directly influences the speed and ease with which your desire moves from conception to birth in the physical world. When you dwell consistently in the consciousness of the wish fulfilled, when you live from the end with quiet certainty, you create the optimal conditions for swift manifestation. But when your consciousness fluctuates between states, sometimes dwelling in the end, sometimes returning to the beginning, you introduce resistance that extends the gestation period unnecessarily. The secret to working with divine timing lies not in trying to control it, but in aligning with it, in recognizing that the same wisdom that knows how to beat your heart and grow your cells, knows precisely when and how to bring your desire into visible form. Your task is not to direct this process but to allow it, not to force it but to flow with it. This alignment happens through surrender, not the surrender of your desire but the surrender of your anxiety about its timing. When you truly trust that what is yours by divine right cannot be kept from you, the pressing need to have it now dissolves into the peaceful certainty that it is already yours in the only place where possession truly matters, in consciousness. From this place of trust you discover something remarkable. What seemed like delay was actually perfect timing. What appeared as obstacles were in fact necessary preparations. What felt like detours were the most direct path possible given the totality of factors involved in your manifestation. Tonight, notice where in your life you have been resisting divine timing, where anxiety about when has created tension in your relationship with what you desire. Now, with compassion for yourself, practice the art of surrendering to the perfect unfoldment already in progress. Feel how this surrender relaxes not just your mind but your body, creating the very openness through which your desire can most easily flow into expression. For in the realm of divine timing, what comes to you does so not according to your schedule, but in the perfect moment when you are ready to receive it. Along the journey of conscious creation, even the most dedicated practitioner encounters moments of doubt, those times when the evidence of the senses seems to contradict the truth held in consciousness, when the gap between inner knowing and outer experience feels unbridgeable. These moments are not failures or signs that your practice is flawed. They are natural parts of the process, as integral to the journey as faith itself. Doubt arises not because you are doing something wrong, but because you are human, because you exist in a world that constantly reinforces the primacy of physical evidence over invisible truth, of what can be seen over what can be known. The appearance of doubt doesn't indicate weakness. It offers an opportunity to deepen your understanding and strengthen your alignment with the creative principles that govern manifestation. When doubts arise, the natural tendency is to fight them, to push them away, to deny their existence, to condemn yourself for experiencing them. But this resistance only empowers doubt, giving it substance and persistence through your very effort to eliminate it. The wiser approach is not to fight doubt but to look through it, to recognize it as a temporary cloud passing across the sky of your consciousness, unable to diminish the sun that shines eternally behind it. This looking through happens not by forcing yourself to believe what seems unbelievable in the moment, but by gently returning your attention to what you know to be true beyond the fluctuations of thought and emotion, not to what you want to believe or think you should believe, but to what you have directly experienced as true in your moments of clearest perception. Remember those moments when you glimpse the true relationship between consciousness and reality, when you recognize with perfect clarity that what you hold in consciousness must express itself in experience. Return to the knowing that emerged in those moments, not as a concept to be believed but as a truth to be remembered. This remembering is aided immeasurably by the practice of gratitude, not the gratitude that thanks for what might come, but the gratitude that recognizes what has already been given. When you give thanks for your desire as an accomplished fact, When you feel the fullness of appreciation for what exists now in consciousness, though not yet in experience, you create a state incompatible with doubt, a vibration that dissolves uncertainty not through combat but through transcendence. Another powerful ally in moments of doubt is stillness, the willingness to be quiet, to cease the mental chatter of worry and analysis, to allow yourself to sink below the surface waves of thought into the deep silent awareness that is your true nature. In this stillness, doubt loses its voice, and the quiet certainty that is always present beneath the noise of thinking naturally reasserts itself. Perhaps most importantly, be gentle with yourself when doubts arise. Do not add to their weight by condemning yourself for experiencing them. Understand that doubt is not the opposite of faith. It is simply faith in something else, in the primacy of appearances, in the limitations suggested by past experience. By recognizing this, you can see doubt not as an enemy to be vanquished, but as a misunderstanding to be tenderly corrected. Tonight, if doubts have been visiting your consciousness regarding your deepest desires, welcome them not as truth-tellers but as opportunities to deepen your understanding and strengthen your alignment with the principles of creation. Feel how this welcoming itself transforms your relationship with doubt, robbing it of its power to disturb your peace or divert your focus from the end you have chosen to live from. For doubt, like every other element of human experience, responds not to resistance but to recognition, not to combat but to compassion. Between the moment of conception in consciousness and the moment of birth in experience, there exists what Neville Goddard called the bridge of incidents, the series of seemingly unrelated events, encounters, and circumstances that lead inevitably from where you are to where you have chosen to be in consciousness. This bridge is not constructed by your conscious planning or effort. It forms itself naturally and often mysteriously according to the end you have assumed as true. The bridge of incidents often appears nothing like what you might have imagined or planned. Its design follows a wisdom far surpassing the limited perspective of the personal self. It takes into account not just your desire but the totality of factors involved in its manifestation, the readiness of other people, the alignment of circumstances, the perfect timing that honors the free will of all concerned while still delivering your good to you in the most efficient way possible. Because of this, the bridge often includes elements that seem, to the limited perspective of the conscious mind, like delays, detours, or even disasters. You lose the job you thought you needed, only to find yourself perfectly positioned for the career you truly desire. A relationship ends painfully, creating the space in which your true life partner can enter. Plans fall through, redirecting you to opportunities you would never have discovered otherwise. These apparent setbacks are not obstacles to your manifestation, they are integral parts of it, necessary adjustments in the fabric of your life experience, creating the optimal conditions for your desire to emerge in its most perfect form. The bridge of incidents never makes mistakes, though the conscious mind, with its limited perspective, often misinterprets its unfolding. The secret to navigating this bridge with grace and ease lies in your willingness to trust the process without needing to control it. When you have truly assumed the state of the wish fulfilled in consciousness, when you live from the end with quiet certainty, you can release the anxious need to manage every detail of how your desire comes to you. This release doesn't mean passivity or resignation. It means engaging fully with each day, each circumstance, each encounter that presents itself, recognizing that everything that appears in your experience is in some way connected to the fulfillment of your desire, whether that connection is immediately apparent or not. Such trust transforms your experience of the bridge from one of anxiety and impatience to one of curiosity and adventure. Instead of resisting what doesn't match your expectations, you remain open to the possibility that what appears is actually a necessary part of the perfect unfolding already in progress. Instead of questioning why, you simply say yes to what is, knowing that your conscious cooperation with the present moment creates the optimal conditions for the next perfect step to reveal itself. As you cross this bridge, you discover something remarkable. The journey itself becomes as fulfilling as the destination. Each step, each encounter, each circumstance reveals itself as not merely a means to an end, but a complete experience in itself, offering its own gifts, its own opportunities for growth and expansion, its own unique possibilities for joy and appreciation. Tonight, identify where in your life you may be in the midst of crossing such a bridge, where events are unfolding in ways you didn't expect or perhaps didn't consciously choose. Now, with the gentle power of trust, allow yourself to see these events not as random or disconnected, but as integral parts of the perfect unfolding of your desire. Feel how this shift in perception transforms your relationship with the present moment, allowing you to engage with it not as an obstacle to be overcome, but as a gift to be received. For in this engagement lies the secret of crossing the bridge of incidents with grace, with ease, and with the quiet certainty that each step leads inevitably to the fulfillment of your heart's desire. In the garden of consciousness, as in any living garden, growth requires not only nurturing but also pruning, the necessary removal of what no longer serves the fullest expression of life. This principle applies with equal truth to the manifestation of your desires, where what appears as loss or release is often the essential preparation for greater fulfillment. The pruning process occurs naturally as you align yourself with the state of consciousness that corresponds to your desire fulfilled. As you begin to embody this new state, everything within you and your experience that conflicts with it must either transform or fall away. This is not punishment or sacrifice. It is the loving intelligence of life itself creating the optimal conditions for your new state to express itself fully. This process often begins internally as attitudes, beliefs, and perspectives that conflict with your new state naturally release their hold on your consciousness. The limiting story you've told about yourself for years suddenly loses its grip. The resentment you've carried dissolves without effort. The fear that has held you back simply ceases to make sense from the perspective of your new state. As this internal pruning progresses, it inevitably extends to your external experience. Relationships that cannot accommodate your expanded consciousness may dissolve or transform. Environments that resonated with your former state may lose their appeal. Activities that once seemed essential may now feel empty or irrelevant. Even physical possessions may leave your life, creating space for what aligns more perfectly with who you are becoming. This process, while natural and necessary, can nonetheless be challenging to the part of you that seeks security in the familiar. The mind conditioned to equate change with danger may interpret necessary release as loss, essential pruning as punishment. It may urge you to cling to what is falling away, to resist the very process that clears the path for what you have asked to receive. The secret to navigating this pruning process with grace lies in your willingness to trust not just the final outcome but the entire unfolding, to recognize that what leaves your life does so not as random chance but as the precise answer to your prayer for transformation. Nothing departs that doesn't need to. Nothing remains that doesn't belong in the garden of your new consciousness. This trust allows you to release with gratitude rather than resistance, to see each ending not as loss but as completion, each clearing not as emptiness but as space being prepared for new growth. It allows you to participate consciously in the pruning process rather than being dragged through it, to recognize what needs to go before it must be painfully torn away. How does one cultivate this trust? Through the recognition that life is always moving toward greater expression, greater fulfillment, greater joy, not through random chance but according to the pattern established in consciousness. When you truly understand that everything in your experience responds to your state of consciousness, you can trust that whatever changes come are perfect reflections of the state you have chosen to embody. Tonight, notice where in your life the pruning process may be underway, where relationships, circumstances, or inner states are shifting or releasing. Instead of resisting these changes or interpreting them as obstacles to your desire, consider the possibility that they are essential aspects of its fulfillment, the necessary clearing away of what cannot coexist with the state you have chosen to embody. Feel how this perspective transforms your experience from one of loss to one of preparation, from ending to beginning, from death to rebirth. For in the divine economy of consciousness, nothing is ever truly lost. It is only transformed into the perfect conditions for your continued growth and expansion. In the art of conscious creation, there exists a state so counterintuitive yet so powerful that, once mastered, it transforms manifestation from effort to effortlessness, from struggle to grace. This state is divine indifference, a quality of consciousness that remains unattached to outcomes while simultaneously holding the absolute certainty of fulfillment. Divine indifference is not apathy or resignation. It is not giving up on your desire or pretending you don't care whether it manifests. It is the serene detachment that comes when you know so completely that your desire is already yours in consciousness, that you no longer feel the anxious need to check for evidence or monitor its progress in the world of form. This state emerges naturally when you truly understand that manifestation is not something you make happen through force of will or positive thinking. It is the automatic expression of your state of consciousness according to immutable law. When this understanding moves from intellectual concept to lived experience, the desperate energy of wanting is replaced by the calm certainty of having even before physical evidence appears. In this state of divine indifference, you continue to live from the end to embody the consciousness of your desire fulfilled, but you do so without the tension of wondering when or how it will appear in your outer experience. You have released the anxiety of results not through surrender of desire but through absolute faith in the perfect operation of the law of consciousness. This release creates the very conditions in which manifestation can occur most swiftly and gracefully. For the anxiety that accompanies attachment to results is itself a state that contradicts the consciousness of fulfillment. When you feel anxious about whether something will manifest, you are actually dwelling in the state of its absence, of its uncertainty, of the possibility that it might not come. This divided consciousness naturally produces divided results. Divine indifference heals this division, creating a unified field of consciousness in which what is held as true internally can express itself externally without resistance or contradiction. It allows you to rest so completely in the state of the wish fulfilled that the question of when ceases to arise, because your consciousness is focused not on a future fulfillment but on a present reality already complete within you. How does one cultivate this divine indifference? Not through trying to be indifferent. Such effort only reinforces the underlying attachment. It comes instead through deepening your understanding of how manifestation actually works, through accumulating experiences that demonstrate to you directly that what is held in consciousness must express itself in reality. With each experience of successful manifestation, your trust in the process strengthens and the anxious need to control or monitor its unfolding naturally diminishes. You discover that the law operates with or without your anxious attention, that in fact it operates more efficiently and gracefully without it. This growing trust allows you to place your attention fully on embodying the state of consciousness that corresponds to your desire fulfilled, releasing all concern about when or how it will appear in your outer experience. This complete focus on state rather than results creates the optimal conditions for swift, effortless manifestation. Tonight, consider where in your life you may be attached to specific outcomes or timelines regarding your desires. Now, with gentle awareness, practice the art of divine indifference, not by trying to stop caring, but by redirecting your attention from anxious monitoring of results to peaceful embodiment of the state from which those results must naturally flow. Feel how this shift transforms your experience from one of waiting and wanting to one of having and being. For in this transformation lies the secret of manifestation without effort, of creation without strain, the divine indifference that is the hallmark of the master creator. In the journey of conscious creation, there comes a time when your commitment to the vision you hold in consciousness is tested, when circumstances appear to contradict what you know to be true, when the evidence of your senses seems to mock the truth held in your heart. It is in these moments that the quality of persistence becomes not just valuable but essential to the fulfillment of your desire. This persistence is not the gritted teeth determination of the natural mind, forcing itself to believe what seems impossible. It is the quiet, unshakable knowing that arises from the spiritual mind. The recognition that what appears in the world of the senses is not the cause of your experience, but its effect, not the source of truth, but its expression, always and only reflecting what has been established in consciousness. When outer circumstances contradict your vision, the natural tendency is to abandon that vision, to assume that reality is showing you what's really possible or what's meant to be. But this interpretation reverses cause and effect. The outer world does not determine what is possible in consciousness. Consciousness determines what is possible in the outer world. What appears as evidence of impossibility is actually the momentum of past consciousness still expressing itself as circumstances catch up with your new state. The persistence of vision means holding steady in the consciousness of your desire fulfilled even when, especially when appearances suggest otherwise. It is the recognition that circumstances are fluid, not fixed, that they respond to the dominant state of consciousness, not the other way around, and that the law of expression is absolute and unchanging regardless of how things appear at any given moment. This persistence is not resistance or denial. It is not closing your eyes to what is or pretending that challenges don't exist. It is seeing through appearances to the causal reality behind them, recognizing that what you're experiencing now is the effect of past consciousness, not the limitation of what's possible for you in the future. How does one cultivate this persistence of vision? It begins with understanding the time lag that exists between a shift in consciousness and its expression in circumstances. Just as light from distant stars takes time to reach Earth, the light of your new consciousness takes time to reorganize the physical world around you. During this interval, circumstances may appear unchanged or even contradictory to your new state. The secret lies in treating these appearances not as evidence of failure but as opportunities to strengthen your alignment with the state you have chosen to embody. Each contradiction becomes not a reason to abandon your vision but an invitation to deepen your commitment to it, to see through the appearance to the truth, to choose again the perspective of the wish fulfilled despite what the senses report. This choosing again happens not through struggle or strain, but through the gentle return of attention to the feeling reality of your desire is already fulfilled. When doubts arise, you acknowledge them without judgment, and then you bring your focus back to how it feels to be the person who has already received what you desire. When fears surface, you allow them their moment of expression, and then you return to the quiet certainty that belongs to the state of fulfillment. The persistence of vision is not something you do once and complete. It is a continuous process of realignment, a moment-by-moment choosing of which reality you will give your allegiance to. The fluid passing reality of appearances, or the eternal reality of consciousness from which all appearances emerge. Tonight, identify where in your life you have allowed outer circumstances to shape your vision, where contradictions have led you to doubt what you know to be true in the depths of your being. Now with gentle determination reclaim the persistence of vision, the unwavering focus on the state you have chosen to embody regardless of appearances. Feel how this persistence itself transforms your relationship with circumstances, allowing you to see through them to the truth that transcends and ultimately reshapes them according to the pattern held in consciousness. At the heart of all manifestation lies a truth so simple yet so profound that once fully grasped, it transforms the very foundation of how you create your reality. You do not attract what you want, attract what you are. More specifically, you experience what you identify with, what you accept as true about yourself at the core level of being. This principle reveals why so many efforts at manifestation fall short of their intended outcome. When you approach manifestation as something you do to get something you don't have, you actually reinforce the identity of one who lacks, who needs, who is separate from their desire. And it is this identity, not your conscious intentions or affirmations, that determines what you experience. The secret lies not in trying to attract or achieve what you want, but in becoming in consciousness the person who already has it, in making an identity shift so complete that your desire ceases to be something external to be acquired, and becomes instead an intrinsic aspect of who you know yourself to be. This shift happens not through adding something to yourself, more knowledge, more techniques, more positive thoughts, but through recognizing what is already true about your essential nature. It is the recognition that beneath all temporary states and circumstances, you are consciousness itself, the creative principle through which all experience flows. From this recognition comes the understanding that any state of consciousness is available to you the moment you identify with it, not as something foreign to be attained, but as an aspect of your own being to be recognized and expressed. The state of wealth, of health, of love, of fulfillment, these are not distant conditions to be pursued, but frequencies of consciousness to be tuned to through the dial of your identity. How does one make this identity shift in practical terms? It begins with attention, with noticing the self you currently identify with regarding your desire. Do you see yourself as someone trying to become wealthy, trying to attract love, trying to heal, trying to succeed? This subtle positioning of yourself as separate from what you desire creates the very gap that manifestation seeks to close. The shift occurs when you consciously relocate the center of your identity from the self that lacks to the self that has, from the self that is becoming to the self that is being. This relocation happens not through pretense or make-believe, but through the recognition that the expanded self, the self for whom your desire is already fulfilled, is already within you, already an aspect of who you are. Your task is not to create this self, but to align with it, to allow it to emerge through the focusing lens of your attention and intention. This alignment happens most naturally through feeling, through allowing yourself to feel what it would feel like to be the person who already has what you desire. Not as a technique to get something, but as a recognition of what is already true at the level of pure potentiality. When you occupy this feeling state not just momentarily but consistently, you begin to think, speak, and act from it naturally, without effort or pretense. Gradually, this new self-concept becomes not something you're trying to believe, but simply the truth of who you know yourself to be. The old identity, with its sense of lack and limitation, doesn't need to be fought or denied. It simply fades in relevance as the new identity takes center stage in your consciousness. Tonight, identify one area of your life where you've been approaching manifestation from the perspective of trying to get or attract something you don't have. Now, with gentle awareness, shift your attention to the self who already has what you desire, not as a future possibility, but as a present reality in consciousness. Feel what it feels like to be this self, to see through these eyes, to live from this expanded state of being. For in this shift of identity lies the secret of effortless manifestation, the alignment with what you already are, rather than the pursuit of what you think you need to become. As you progress in the art of conscious creation, you develop a faculty so subtle yet so powerful that it transforms your entire relationship with manifestation. The inner knowing, an intuitive recognition of truth that transcends logic, evidence, and even belief itself. This inner knowing is not something you acquire or develop. It is something you uncover, something you remember. It is your natural state of connection with the divine intelligence that orchestrates all creation. This connection never breaks, never falters, never fails. It only falls from awareness when attention focuses exclusively on the evidence of the senses and the conclusions of the logical mind. The inner knowing reveals itself in many ways as a quiet certainty that persists despite contradictory circumstances, as a subtle feeling of rightness that needs no external validation, as an intuitive recognition of the next perfect step without understanding the entire path. It communicates not through words or concepts, but through the language of direct knowing, the same knowing through which your heart knows to beat and your lungs know to breathe. This knowing often appears as subtle signals in your experience, synchronicities that confirm you're on the right path, dreams that reveal aspects of your manifestation process not accessible to the conscious mind, moments of unexpected clarity when the path ahead suddenly illuminates, physical sensations that register in the body as truth beyond doubt. Learning to recognize and trust these signals is essential to mastering the art of conscious creation, for the inner knowing sees beyond the limitations of time and space, beyond the apparent obstacles of current circumstances, beyond the fears and doubts of the personal self. It perceives from the perspective of the completed manifestation, guiding you unerringly toward what is already accomplished in consciousness. How does one cultivate sensitivity to this inner knowing? It begins with stillness, with creating space in consciousness for the subtle voice of intuition to be heard above the clamor of thoughts, judgments, and projections. When the mind quiets even briefly, the inner knowing naturally rises to awareness, not as something being accessed, but as something being remembered. This remembering is aided immeasurably by attention, by the conscious recognition of the subtle signals through which the inner knowing communicates. When you notice a synchronicity, acknowledge it not as coincidence but as confirmation. When you experience a moment of unexpected clarity, receive it as guidance rather than dismissing it as imagination. When your body registers truth as a feeling of alignment or expansion, honor that feeling as the communication of wisdom beyond the reach of logic. Trust plays an essential role in this process, not blind trust in something external, but trust in the divine intelligence that expresses through your own consciousness. This trust develops naturally as you accumulate experiences of being guided perfectly despite not knowing the way, of receiving exactly what you need, despite not seeing how it would come, of arriving precisely where you intended despite taking what appeared to be detours. With each such experience, trust deepens not as something you're trying to cultivate but as the natural response to direct knowing. The gap between intuitive guidance and your willingness to follow it gradually closes, creating a seamless flow between the wisdom of the inner knowing and your movement through the world. This integration transforms manifestation from a process of trying to make something happen to one of allowing yourself to be guided to what already exists. The anxiety of not knowing how or when dissolves into the peaceful certainty that the path is unfolding perfectly according to a wisdom that sees what you cannot yet see. Tonight, bring your attention to the subtle ways in which the inner knowing may already be communicating with you regarding your deepest desires. Notice the synchronicities, the moments of clarity, the feeling signals that register in your body as alignment or truth. Receive these communications not as random or meaningless, but as the breadcrumbs guiding you home to the fulfillment that already exists in the realm of completion. For in this receiving lies the secret of moving through the world not as one who seeks, but as one who follows the unerring guidance of the inner knowing. In the lexicon of conscious creation, gratitude holds a place of singular importance, not merely as a virtuous response to blessings received, but as a creative force in itself, a state of consciousness that shapes reality according to its own nature. True gratitude is not just a feeling, it is a frequency of being that aligns you with the very source of all manifestation. The world has taught you that gratitude follows receiving, that you first get what you want, and then you feel thankful for it. But in the deeper understanding of creation, this sequence is reversed. Gratitude precedes receiving, not as a technique to get something, but as the natural expression of a consciousness that recognizes what is already given, already accomplished, already complete in the invisible realm of cause. This gratitude is not about being thankful for what might come in some future moment. It is about recognizing with absolute clarity that what you desire exists now in completion, and expressing appreciation for this eternal truth. It is the gratitude of recognition rather than the gratitude of receipt. When you enter this state of recognition, something remarkable happens. The frequency of your consciousness shifts from the energy of wanting and seeking to the energy of having and being. This shift is not about convincing yourself of something that isn't true. It is about aligning yourself with what is eternally true beyond the limitations of time and physical evidence. This alignment creates the optimal conditions for manifestation, not because gratitude is a technique that produces results, but because the consciousness of gratitude is identical to the consciousness of fulfillment. They are not separate states, they are aspects of the same state. When you truly feel grateful for something, you cannot simultaneously feel that you lack it. The two states cannot coexist. How then does one enter this state of gratitude before the physical evidence appears? Not through pretense or forced positive thinking, but through the recognition of a metaphysical truth, that all creation begins in consciousness and moves outward to manifestation according to immutable law. When you truly understand this principle, gratitude for what exists in consciousness becomes as natural as gratitude for what exists in physical form, for both are equally real, equally present, equally yours to experience. This gratitude expresses itself not just in words or thoughts, but in the entirety of your being, in how you move through your day, in how you relate to others, in how you respond to circumstances. When you are genuinely grateful for something as already yours, you naturally embody the state of having received it. You speak, think, and act from that state without effort or pretense. The practice begins with quiet recognition, with taking time each day to feel the reality of your desire as already fulfilled, and to express genuine appreciation for this fulfillment. This is not affirmation or autosuggestion. It is conscious alignment with what is already true in the realm of pure potentiality. As this practice deepens, gratitude ceases to be something you do at specific times, and becomes instead your natural state of being, a continuous recognition of the abundance, wholeness, and fulfillment that exist as your birthright. From this state, manifestation happens not as something you achieve through effort, but as something you allow through alignment. Tonight, bring your attention to something you deeply desire to experience. Now, with the gentle power of recognition, feel the gratitude that naturally arises when you acknowledge this desire as already fulfilled in consciousness, not as a technique to make it happen, but as an alignment with what is already true beyond the evidence of the senses. Feel how this gratitude shifts your entire state of being from one of seeking to one of having found. For in this shift lies the creative power of gratitude, not as a response to receiving, but as the very frequency through which receiving becomes possible. In the interconnected field of consciousness, no change occurs in isolation. When you shift your own state, when you move from limitation to expansion, from doubt to certainty, from fear to love, this transformation creates ripples that extend far beyond the boundaries of your personal experience, influencing not just your own reality but the collective field in which all reality takes form. This principle, which we might call the ripple effect, reveals the profound responsibility and power that accompanies conscious creation. For when you transform your own consciousness, you do not merely change what you personally experience, you contribute to the transformation of the entire field in which all consciousness expresses itself. Consider how water responds when a single drop falls into it. The ripples move outward in concentric circles, touching everything within their expanding reach. So it is with consciousness. When you shift from a state of lack to a state of abundance, from a state of conflict to a state of peace, from a state of separation to a state of unity, the effects of this shift extend outward, touching the consciousness of everyone and everything connected to you, which in the unified field of being includes all that is. This understanding transforms how you approach the practice of conscious creation. It reveals that your work is never just about manifesting specific conditions or circumstances for your personal benefit. It is about contributing to the evolution of consciousness itself through the vehicle of your own awakening. The state you choose to embody, whether of love or fear, abundance or lack, peace or conflict, becomes your contribution to the collective field. When you choose to live from the end, to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled despite contrary appearances, you strengthen those same qualities in the collective consciousness. And conversely, when you allow yourself to be defined by limitations or external conditions, you reinforce those patterns in the greater whole. How does this understanding change your practice? It adds a dimension of purpose and responsibility to your work with consciousness. It reveals that your efforts to maintain the state of the wish fulfilled, to live from the end regardless of appearances, serve not just your own manifestation but the awakening of all consciousness to its true creative nature. It also illuminates why certain manifestations may take time to externalize in your experience. The denser the collective field around a particular belief or condition, the more persistent your own embodiment of the new state must be to create lasting change. This is not because the law is inconsistent, but because you are working not just with your individual consciousness, but with the collective field in which it expresses. This understanding brings compassion to your practice. When you recognize that each person, including yourself, is influenced by the collective field even while contributing to it, you can hold with tenderness the moments when you or others fall back into limited states. These are not failures but opportunities to choose again, to reassert the truth of what you have recognized, to strengthen the new pattern you are establishing in consciousness. The ripple effect also reveals why your internal work, the quiet, invisible shifts in your own consciousness, are as powerful and important as any external action you might take. A single person dwelling consistently in the consciousness of peace affects the entire field in ways that cannot be measured but are nonetheless real and consequential. Tonight, recognize the ripple effect of your own consciousness on the field of all being. Feel the responsibility and opportunity that comes with this recognition, not as a burden, but as an invitation to contribute consciously to the evolution of the whole through the transformation of your own state. For in this contribution lies not just the fulfillment of your personal desires, but your participation in the awakening of all consciousness to its true creative nature. At the heart of conscious creation lies a truth so fundamental yet so easily overlooked that most seekers spend years circling around it without fully grasping its significance. All creation happens in the eternal now, the timeless present in which all possibilities exist and from which all manifestation emerges. The mind, conditioned by the physical senses, perceives time as linear, as a straight line flowing from past through present to future. From this perspective, manifestation appears to happen over time, moving from desire to fulfillment across the bridge of becoming. But this perception, while useful for navigating the physical world, obscures the deeper reality that all creation happens in the now, the only moment that ever exists. In the eternal now, your desire doesn't exist as a potentiality waiting to be fulfilled in some distant future. It exists as a completed reality in the realm of pure consciousness, waiting not to be created but to be recognized and expressed through the focusing lens of your awareness. Your task is not to move toward it in time but to align with it in consciousness. This alignment happens not through future-oriented techniques of affirmation or visualization but through the present-centered practice of embodiment, of assuming the feeling and consciousness of your desire is already fulfilled in the only moment that exists now. When you truly enter this state of present fulfillment, the need to wait for future manifestation dissolves into the recognition of present completion. The paradox that confounds the logical mind is that this recognition doesn't deny the appearance of time unfolding, it simply sees through it to the causal reality behind it. From the perspective of the eternal now, what appears as time is actually the sequential revealing of what already exists in completion. The seed doesn't become the oak tree over time, it reveals the oak tree that already exists within it according to an unfolding sequence that appears as time to the limited perspective of the senses. How does this understanding transform your practice of conscious creation? It shifts your attention from seeking future fulfillment to recognizing present completion. Instead of asking, when will my desire manifest, you ask, how does it feel to have already received what I desire? Instead of working to create something new, you work to recognize what eternally is. This shift happens through the focused attention on how it feels now to be the person who has already received what you desire, not as something you're trying to convince yourself of, but as something you're allowing yourself to recognize as already true in the eternal now where all creation takes place. When you enter this state of present recognition, something remarkable happens. The anxiety of waiting dissolves, the need to control the process disappears, and the peaceful certainty of already having received takes its place. From this state, manifestation unfolds not as something you're making happen, but as something you're allowing to express itself according to its own perfect timing. The eternal now is not a concept to be understood intellectually. It is a reality to be experienced directly. This experience comes most naturally in moments of complete presence, when you're fully engaged in the current moment without reference to past or future. In these moments of pure awareness, time seems to stand still, and the recognition of your oneness with all that is arises naturally from the depths of your being. Tonight, bring your attention fully into the present moment, the only place where creation happens, the only point of power. From this place of complete presence, feel the reality of your desire as already fulfilled, not in some distant future, but in the eternal now where all possibilities exist simultaneously. Feel how this recognition transforms your relationship with time itself, releasing you from the bondage of waiting and opening you to the freedom of having already received. For in this freedom lies the secret of all manifestation, not as a process that unfolds over time, but as a recognition that happens in the timeless now. At the heart of conscious creation lies a paradox so profound that the logical mind struggles to comprehend it, yet so essential that without embracing it, true mastery remains elusive. This is the divine paradox of doing and being, the mysterious interplay between active participation and passive allowing that characterizes all genuine creation. The world has taught you to exist at one extreme or the other, either striving and struggling to make things happen through force of will, or passively waiting for life to unfold according to some predetermined plan. But the truth of conscious creation exists in the delicate balance between these extremes, in the harmonious integration of doing and being that mirrors the creative process of life itself. This paradox reveals itself in every aspect of manifestation. You must be absolutely clear about what you desire, yet completely detached from how it comes to you. You must live as though your prayer has already been answered, yet remain open to forms of fulfillment you could never have imagined. You must assume complete responsibility for creating your reality, yet surrender completely to the wisdom that orchestrates the process of manifestation. These are not contradictions to be resolved, they are polarities to be integrated, complementary aspects of the same creative principle expressing itself through the vehicle of your consciousness. Like inhalation and exhalation in a single breath, doing and being are not opposing forces but integral parts of a unified process. The divine paradox teaches that manifestation requires both your active participation and your willing surrender, not as separate steps in a linear process but as simultaneous aspects of the same creative act. You participate through the conscious choosing of the state you wish to embody. You surrender through allowing that state to express itself according to its own nature, in its own perfect timing. This participation happens not primarily through external action but through the internal act of assuming the state that corresponds to your desire fulfilled. It is not about doing more but about being different, about relocating the center of your identity from the limited self that lacks to the expanded self that already possesses. From this new state of being, doing emerges not as struggle or striving but as the natural expression of who you have become in consciousness. The actions you take are not attempts to create what is missing but expressions of what is already complete within you. They flow not from anxiety or need but from the peaceful certainty of one who knows that what they desire is already theirs in the realm of completion. How does one navigate this divine paradox in practical terms? It begins with the recognition that your primary creative work happens not in the outer world of action but in the inner world of consciousness. Your task is not to make things happen but to assume the state from which they happen naturally according to their own inherent pattern. This assumption is itself an act, perhaps the most significant act of which consciousness is capable. It requires the focused direction of attention away from appearances and toward the truth you wish to establish as your reality. This is not passive but deeply active, a conscious choosing of where and how you will place the precious resource of your awareness. Yet within this active choosing exists the paradoxical element of surrender, the willing release of how and when your desire will express itself in visible form. This surrender is not resignation or passivity, it is the profound trust in the perfect unfolding of what has already been established in consciousness. Tonight, notice where in your creative practice you may have been overemphasizing either doing or being, either striving to make things happen or waiting passively for them to occur. Now, with gentle awareness, allow yourself to embrace the divine paradox that integrates these apparent opposites into a unified approach to conscious creation. Feel how this integration transforms your experience from one of effort and uncertainty to one of focused alignment and peaceful trust. For in this transformation lies the secret of mastery, not as the triumph of one aspect over another, but as the harmonious integration of all aspects into a single creative expression of who you truly are. Beyond the techniques of manifestation, beyond the principles of conscious creation, beyond even the understanding of universal law, there exists a level of teaching so profound that it transforms not just how you create your reality, but why, not just the means of manifestation, but its ultimate purpose in the evolution of consciousness itself. These highest teachings reveal that the journey of manifestation is not primarily about getting what you want or even becoming who you choose to be. It is about awakening to who you already are in the depths of your being, about recognizing your essential nature as consciousness itself, the creative principle through which all experience flows. From this recognition emerges an understanding that transforms the entire foundation of practice. Manifestation is not something you do to get something you don't have. It is something you allow as an expression of what you eternally are. It is not a path to fulfillment, but the natural extension of the fulfillment that exists as your birthright. The highest teachings reveal that desire itself, the longing that initiates the journey of manifestation, arises not from lack or need, but from the inherent creativity of consciousness seeking to know itself through infinite forms of expression. Your desires are not random or meaningless. They are the specific ways in which the infinite seeks to express itself through the unique vehicle of your being. This understanding shifts the focus of practice from the fulfillment of personal desires to the alignment with the creative impulse that gives rise to those desires in the first place. It reveals that the ultimate purpose of manifestation is not personal gain or achievement, but the fuller expression of the divine through the vehicle of your consciousness. From this perspective, success in manifestation is measured not by what you acquire or achieve, but by the degree to which you allow yourself to be an open channel for the creative force of life itself. The question becomes not what can I get, or even who can I become, but how fully can I express the infinite potential that exists within me. The highest teachings also reveal the intimate connection between consciousness and love, that the creative force expressing itself through you is, at its essence, the force of love seeking to know itself through ever-expanding forms of expression. This recognition transforms manifestation from a process of personal achievement to one of loving service to the greater unfolding of consciousness itself. In practical terms, this shift does not negate the importance of clarity, aligned state, or consistent practice, but it places these elements in a larger context that infuses them with deeper meaning and purpose. You no longer practice the law to get something for yourself, you practice it to participate consciously in the creative process through which all life unfolds. This participation requires not just the mastery of technique, but the purification of intent, the gradual alignment of your personal will with the greater will that seeks expression through you. As this alignment deepens, manifestation becomes not something you do, but something you allow as the natural expression of who you are. The highest teachings remind us that the ultimate goal of conscious creation is not to bend reality to your personal will, but to so align yourself with the creative principle that your will and its will become one and the same. In this alignment, you discover that what you truly desire and what seeks to express itself through you are identical, not because you have subjugated your will, but because you have recognized its source. Tonight, consider the desires that feel most pressing in your consciousness. Now, with the perspective of the highest teachings, look beyond the specific forms these desires take to the essential quality they seek to express. Is it greater love, deeper peace, fuller expression, expanded awareness? Recognize that these qualities are not separate from who you are, but are the very essence of your being, seeking to know itself more fully through your unique expression. Feel how this recognition transforms your relationship with desire itself, from something you pursue to something you allow as the natural expression of who you already are. For in this allowing lies the secret of the highest teachings, not as concepts to be understood, but as truth to be lived. In the journey of conscious creation, there comes a point of maturity, when manifestation ceases to be a series of separate events, discrete desires fulfilled one after another, and becomes instead a continuous flow, a perpetual harvest in which fulfillment follows fulfillment in an unbroken cycle of creative expression. This perpetual harvest emerges naturally when you have integrated the principles of conscious creation so completely that they no longer require deliberate application, but have become your habitual way of being in the world. At this stage, you no longer need to remind yourself to assume the state of the wish fulfilled or to live from the end. These approaches have become so intrinsic to your consciousness that you naturally embody them in every aspect of life. The perpetual harvest is characterized by a distinct quality of ease, not the ease of indolence or passivity, but the ease that comes when you are in perfect alignment with the creative forces of the universe. In this alignment, what you desire flows to you not as the result of struggle or striving, but as the natural expression of who you have become in consciousness. This ease extends to your relationship with desire itself. In the perpetual harvest, desires arise not from a sense of lack or need, but from the natural creativity of consciousness seeking new forms of expression. They emerge not as problems to be solved, but as invitations to expand, not as indications of what's missing, but as inspirations for what's next in your journey of conscious creation. The perpetual harvest also transforms your relationship with time. The anxious waiting that characterizes early stages of practice gives way to peaceful trust in divine timing. You recognize that just as nature produces its harvest in cycles, spring planting followed by summer growth followed by autumn harvest, so too does consciousness unfold according to its own perfect rhythm, neither rushed nor delayed, but precisely aligned with the readiness of all elements involved. This recognition allows you to rest in the certainty of fulfillment even during apparent fallow periods, those times when little seems to be happening on the surface. You understand that these periods, like winter in the natural cycle, are not absences of growth but essential phases of rest, integration, and preparation for the next cycle of creative expression. How does one cultivate this perpetual harvest? Not through more technique or effort, but through deeper integration of the principles already understood. It comes through consistent practice until what began as deliberate application becomes natural embodiment, until what started as something you do becomes simply who you are. This integration happens most powerfully through gratitude. Not the gratitude that hopes to attract more by being thankful for what has come, but the gratitude that recognizes the abundance already present in each moment, regardless of outer appearances. This recognition attunes your consciousness to the frequency of perpetual fulfillment, creating the optimal conditions for continuous manifestation. The perpetual harvest also requires trust, the deep, unshakable knowing that the law of consciousness is absolutely reliable, that what you hold as true in the depths of your being must express itself in your experience. This trust allows you to release the need to monitor or manage the manifestation process, creating the space in which your good can flow to you unimpeded by anxiety or doubt. Perhaps most importantly, the perpetual harvest requires presence, the willingness to be fully engaged with the now rather than constantly projecting into a future where fulfillment supposedly awaits. When you recognize that the eternal now is the only place where creation happens, you discover that fulfillment is not something to be achieved over time, but something to be recognized in each present moment as it unfolds. Tonight, consider how you might shift from seeing manifestation as separate events to experiencing it as a continuous flow, a perpetual harvest in which fulfillment naturally follows fulfillment according to the law of your own consciousness. Feel how this shift transforms your relationship with both desire and fulfillment, creating the space for a new way of being in which abundance, joy, and creative expression become not achievements but simply the natural state from which you live. For in this natural state lies the secret of the perpetual harvest, not as something to be attained, but as something to be recognized as already yours by divine right. As you deepen in the practice of conscious creation, a profound truth gradually reveals itself. Your life is not a random collection of disconnected events, but a coherent symphony in which every element, Every circumstance, every relationship, every experience plays its perfect part in the greater composition of your journey. This symphony does not unfold by chance or coincidence, but according to the pattern established in your consciousness, not just your conscious thoughts and intentions, but the totality of what you hold as true about yourself and your relationship with life. The state you embody, the identity you assume, the beliefs you accept, these form the score from which the symphony of your life plays itself out in perfect harmony. The recognition of this truth transforms how you approach both creation and interpretation of experience. You begin to see that what appears as separate and disconnected, the job opportunity that arises unexpectedly, the relationship that evolves in ways you couldn't have predicted, the apparent setback that redirects your path, are actually integrated elements of a unified composition, each contributing its unique note to the overall harmony. This perspective invites a profound shift in how you engage with the creative process. Instead of trying to control every detail of how your desires manifest, you focus on establishing the dominant theme or tone of the symphony through the state of consciousness you choose to embody. You recognize that from this state, all elements will naturally arrange themselves in perfect harmony, creating a composition far more beautiful and complex than your limited planning could have conceived. The symphony of life teaches the art of conscious participation without control, of playing your part fully, while allowing all other instruments to play theirs according to the greater wisdom of the composition. It reveals that your role is not to determine every note, but to establish the key in which the symphony plays through the state of consciousness you maintain. This participation happens through attention, through the conscious choice of where you place your focus moment by moment. Like a conductor who emphasizes certain sections of the orchestra while allowing others to recede, you direct the energy of your awareness toward what you wish to experience more fully, knowing that what you attend to expands in your symphony according to immutable law. The symphony also teaches the importance of rhythm and timing, the recognition that creation unfolds not according to your schedule but according to its own intrinsic pattern and tempo. Some movements are allegro, filled with rapid change and dynamic expression. Others are adagio, characterized by slow, deliberate unfoldment. Neither is superior. Both are essential to the beauty and completeness of the overall composition. How does one align more fully with this symphony? It begins with listening, with creating space in consciousness to hear the subtle harmonies already playing beneath the surface noise of daily life. This listening happens in moments of stillness, in periods of quiet reflection, in the gaps between thoughts where the deeper currents of the symphony reveal themselves. From listening comes recognition, the clear awareness of the themes and patterns already expressing themselves in your life symphony. Some of these may be harmonious, reflecting the states of consciousness you have consciously chosen. Others may be discordant, reflecting states you have unconsciously accepted or inherited. This recognition allows you to make conscious choices about which themes you wish to emphasize and which you wish to allow to fade from your composition. The art of conscious composing lies not in forcing new themes into an existing symphony, but in shifting your attention and intention so completely that the key of the entire composition naturally modulates. When you firmly establish a new dominant tone in consciousness through consistent embodiment of the state that corresponds to your desire, the entire symphony gradually shifts to align with this new key. Tonight, listen to the symphony of your life with fresh ears, noticing the themes and patterns already playing themselves out in your experience. Recognize these not as random or disconnected, but as the perfect expression of the consciousness from which they emerge. Now, with the gentle power of conscious choice, attune yourself to the key in which you wish your symphony to play, to the state of consciousness that corresponds to your deepest desires fulfilled. Feel how this attunement itself begins to shift the entire composition, creating new harmonies, new rhythms, new possibilities for expression. For in this conscious attunement lies the secret of the symphony of life, not as something you control, but as something you participate in through the creative power of your own consciousness. At the culmination of the journey of conscious creation lies not just the manifestation of specific desires, but the emergence of what might be called the realized self, the state of consciousness in which you recognize yourself as the creator of your reality, not as concept or belief, but as lived experience. The realized self is not a fixed achievement or final destination, but a continuous unfoldment, a perpetual discovery of the creative power that has always been your birthright. It is the state in which the principles of conscious creation are no longer techniques to be applied, but simply the way you naturally perceive and engage with reality. In this state, you recognize that you are not merely the product of your circumstances, but the creator of them, that your experience of life reflects not what exists separately from you, but what you hold as true in the depths of your consciousness. This recognition transforms your relationship with everything you experience, revealing it not as something happening to you but as something happening through you and for you according to the law of your own being. The realized self does not abandon desire but transforms its meaning and purpose. Desires no longer arise from a sense of lack or separation but from the creative impulse of consciousness seeking new forms of expression through the unique vehicle of your being. They become not indications of what's missing but invitations to what's next in your journey of conscious creation. This transformation of desire changes how you approach the manifestation process itself. You no longer strive to attract what you want or to achieve what you don't have. You simply recognize what is already yours in consciousness and allow it to express itself naturally in your experience. Manifestation becomes not something you do but something you allow as the natural expression of who you are. The realized self also transforms your relationship with time and process. The anxious waiting that characterizes earlier stages of practice gives way to peaceful trust in the perfect unfoldment of what has already been established in consciousness. You recognize that what appears as delay or obstacle is actually the necessary preparation for perfect manifestation according to divine timing. This trust extends to all aspects of your experience, even those that appear challenging or unwanted from the limited perspective of the personal self. The realized self recognizes that nothing enters your experience by accident or mistake, that everything serves the greater purpose of your awakening to who you truly are as the creator of your reality. From this recognition comes a profound sense of responsibility, not the burden of blame or fault, but the empowerment of knowing that you are the author of your experience through the states of consciousness you choose to embody. This responsibility is not something imposed from without, but something recognized from within as the natural expression of your creative sovereignty. The realized self does not deny the appearance of external conditions or the influence of collective consciousness on individual experience, but it sees through these appearances to the causal reality behind them, to the truth that consciousness is the only reality and that what you experience as the world is nothing more or less than consciousness expressed according to the patterns you hold as true. How does one cultivate this realized self? Not through more knowledge or technique, but through consistent embodiment of what is already understood, through the moment-by-moment choice to live from the truth that has been revealed rather than the appearances that seem to contradict it. This embodiment happens not through force of will but through the gentle persistence of returning again and again to the state of consciousness that corresponds to who you truly are. Tonight, as we conclude this journey together, allow yourself to recognize the realized self not as someone you must become through effort or achievement, but as who you already are beneath the accumulated layers of limited perception and belief. Feel the natural authority that comes with this recognition, not the authority of ego or will, but the quiet confidence of one who knows themselves as the creator of their reality through the states of consciousness they choose to embody. From this place of quiet knowing, look out upon your life with new eyes that see not what appears to be but what truly is, eyes that perceive not separate events but the unified symphony of your own creation, eyes that recognize each experience not as something happening to you but as something expressing through you for the greater purpose of your awakening to the truth of who you are. The realized self, the creator of your reality, the living expression of the divine principle itself in human form. For in this recognition lies the ultimate secret of living as though God has already answered, because you have recognized yourself as the very answer you have been seeking all along.